Alright, we need to talk about Frogwares, a development studio that's had some of the worst luck with game publishers. So this is a development studio that created games like The Sinking City and some of the recent Sherlock Holmes games, and if you go to their website right now and go to news, you'll find a number of blog posts detailing some of their unfortunate circumstances, with the latest one reading as follows, but we'll get to that in a bit. Before that, I need to provide some context. So, their issues began all the way back in 2019 when they were being published by Focus Home Interactive. Because of the issues they've been encountering with this publisher, they released the following blog post on September 26, 2019. And the headline reads, "Official statement on removal of our games from storefronts by Focus Home Interactive." It reads right here, "Some of our games are being removed from Sony's and Microsoft's storefronts and even maybe from Steam. Why? Because Focus Home Interactive, the licensee or publisher, refuses to transfer the title IDs to us, the creators and IP owners of those titles, even though our publishing and distribution agreement has expired. What should be a relatively simple process, Focus Home is making a pain in the ass, and so Frogwares would need to set new storefronts and submit new certification for each game, a process that takes time and money." And they expressed how this will all ultimately land a serious blow to their studio. So Frogwares decided throughout 2020 that they would leap fully into self-publishing, according to this games industry article. But before they could get there, they faced issues with yet another publisher, Bigben Interactive and Nacon, publishers of their latest release, The Sinking City. And this was detailed in a blog post from roughly a year later, August 25th, 2020. And that reads as follows. "The Sinking City has been taken down from Steam and many other notable stores. This time that was done, I believe, by Frogwares. We were forced to terminate the contract with our licensee for several breaches of our agreement. Since June 27th, 2019, we have been involved in legal battles with Bigben Interactive, Nacon." And then they really go into some of the egregious ways that BBI Nacon has behaved, namely that there were hundreds and hundreds of days behind in payments in total, average of 40 days late with their payments, despite the developers' milestones always being on time. At one point, BBI Nacon had bought out this competing studio who were also making a Lovecraftian game, and they mandated to Frogwares that they just give away their source code of The Sinking City to that competing studio, even though that wasn't part of the deal. After Frogwares refused, they stopped receiving financial contributions for over 4 months, which sure as hell sounds like retribution on the part of the publisher because they didn't get what they wanted. There was a general lack of transparency and communication, especially on the sales forecasts, which made it very hard for the development studio to figure out, just how their game would do. And then after The Sinking City's launch, apparently Bigben and Nacon sent a letter to the developers at Frogwares telling them that their milestones that were previously approved would be canceled, and so they would not be able to receive any profit from the sales of their games. And that eventually culminated in a lawsuit being filed against Bigben and Nacon on August 2019, and this legal battle is still ongoing. Then we started to receive income reports, though incomplete and undocumented. So it was only after they were seeing consequences that Bigben and Nacon actually started to partially do what they were supposed to do, but even then, they did it poorly. Because the reports were incomplete and undocumented, they said that it was not possible for us to see if the revenue was correctly calculated or even how many units were sold. Now, this next bit is especially relevant to today's story, as it is detailed that Bigben and Nacon tried to engage in activities that were the equivalent of a hostile takeover. So, for example, copyright notices and labels on box covers of The Sinking City indicating that Frogwares are the developers were removed or incorrectly displayed. So if you go to eBay right now, for example, you can see that in any listing that showcases the official artwork of the Sinking City box cover, you see the Frogwares logo right down here. But when you look at what was actually physically shipped, you'll see that the Frogwares logo is entirely missing. So right down here, no Frogwares logo. Right down here, no Frogwares logo. Only Bigben is shown on the right. Beyond that, Bigben and Nacon bought a bunch of domain names in relation to Frogwares brands like The Sinking City and Sherlock Holmes. Beyond that, Bigben and Nacon took it a step further by creating a Sinking City tabletop RPG without telling the developers and without their permission. They decided to just kind of pull the trigger on that as if, they own the IP, featuring the wrong copyright notices, not crediting Frogwares in any way, shape, or form. And just in general, across marketing materials and listings, Bigben and Nacon tried to remove any signs of Frogwares' involvement. Bigben and Nacon even went as far as trying to release a pirated version of The Sinking City on a third-party PC game subscription service, which apparently Frogwares learned by coincidence on February 2020. But the thing is, this wouldn't be the only time they would attempt to publish a pirated version of that title. But we'll get to that in a bit. After Frogwares terminated their contract with Bigben and Nacon on April 20th, 2020, which they could do without further formality since Bigben and Nacon breached their contract, the publishers exploited emergency laws in France in relation to the COVID-19 pandemic as an excuse to say that, oh, we're not able to terminate our contract, sorry, to keep them locked in. Fortunately, that didn't work when Nacon tried to oppose a termination in court on July 17th, 2020. The judge rejected that demand, so under the eyes of the law, Frogwares says that the contract is officially over, completely terminated. But the publishers continue to profit off of Frogwares' game, despite it not belonging to them, and so that's why Frogwares, as a last resort, decided to delist The Sinking City from any remaining stores so that they could halt sales from going to the publisher. Now, one area where the courts ruled in favor of Bigben and Nacon was that Frogwares would not be allowed to delist The Sinking City from those storefronts until the situation is resolved, until the courts determine who actually owns the rights to The Sinking City, who breached their contracts, and what is the ultimate resolution to all this. The courts decided this not that long ago on January 5th, 2021, so we did eventually start seeing The Sinking City crop up on the storefronts that they were removed from, chief among them being Steam. We did see The Sinking City go up on Steam just a couple days ago on February 26th, 2021. But there's a problem. Frogwares claims that the version of The Sinking City uploaded to Steam on February 26th is not a version created by Frogwares, so they said we do not recommend the purchase of this version. More news to come soon. Days later, on March 1st, 2021, Bigben Nacon responded with this statement published on Steam that reads, "For the release of The Sinking City on Steam published by Nacon, Frogwares posted on Twitter urging players not to buy it. We regret that Frogwares persists in disrupting the release of The Sinking City. It was Frogwares who came to Nacon to request financing for the development of the game, and to date, more than 10 million euros have been paid to Frogwares by Nacon. It was Frogwares that relied on our marketing and promotion teams representing thousands of hours of work and several million euros worth of investment. Now that the game has been fully developed and published, largely thanks to Nacon's money and work, Frogwares would like to revise the terms of the contract to their sole advantage. It's easy to play the victim, but all we seek is that Frogwares respect its commitments both in the contract and as demanded by the courts." And Nacon insists here that the version of Sinking City uploaded to Steam recently by them is an official and complete one with nothing illegal about it. Now, I have not seen the contract, so I don't know the exact terms, and I wouldn't be able to tell you who is legally in the right or who's legally in the wrong. What I will say about the statement, though, is that Nacon is acting as if Frogwares should be grateful. It was through our money and marketing that you managed to sell your game, but this is a partnership. There's a contractual obligation to uphold the terms. The whole point of a partnership is that both entities, or any entities involved, will mutually benefit. Just because you as a publisher funded the project doesn't give you carte blanche to do whatever you want with a developer's IP. If the contract stipulates that the IP does belong to the developer, then that's that. What I will say is that so far, Frogwares does seem to have the receipts for their claims. And the same goes for Frogwares' latest accusation against Bigben Nacon that they pirated The Sinking City from another storefront, cracked it, then modified it before uploading it and reselling the game as if it was their own. Now, there is a YouTube video here from Frogwares that you can watch that goes into details about this, but the same details can also be found in this blog post published on March 1st, 2021, and I'd like to go over this and share my thoughts on the matter. So the bottom line presented in this introductory paragraph states that Bigben Nacon illegally uploaded our game The Sinking City on Steam on February 26th in order to commercialize it under their own name without our knowledge. The publisher stole, hacked, changed the source code, and tried to cover up the reporting trail. Apparently, during their legal battle, something that Nacon tried to get Frogwares to do was deliver a new master version of the game and allow Nacon to publish that version. But Frogwares says that the French justice refused Nacon's demands twice, first in July of 2020 and then in October of 2020 during an appeal. Recall that it was also in July 2020 when Nacon attempted to oppose the termination of the contract between Frogwares and Bigben and Nacon, but the judge determined that the termination is in effect and the contract is officially terminated. It would seem as though something else that was discussed was whether Frogwares was obligated to create this new master version that Nacon and Bigben were demanding for. According to Frogwares, in their latest blog post, the final decision on whether Frogwares is obligated to deliver the Steam version that Nacon is demanding is still set to be judged in trial court in the next months or even years. So that decision is still up in the air, and yet Bigben and Nacon decided to jump the gun. On February 26, to our great surprise, we found a new version of the Sinking City that was uploaded to Steam and launched, but Frogwares didn't deliver such a version. Bigben and Nacon took matters into their own hands. Apparently, they downloaded a version of the Sinking City purchased on the storefront Games Planet and then uploaded it to Steam as if it were a Steam version. And recall that this isn't the first time. In the August 25th, 2020 blog post from Frogwares, they detailed how they learned by pure coincidence on February 2020 that there was an attempt to release a pirated version of the Sinking City on a third-party PC game subscription service. But as if that wasn't enough, there was yet another attempt at doing that. Elaine Falk, Nacon owner and CEO, warned us on December 28th, 2020 in writing that you have 48 hours to upload a new Steam master, otherwise we'll use all solutions available within the law and the contract. That sure as hell reads like a ransom note, except what they did 48 hours later seems legally questionable. Nacon purchased a version of the Sinking City through the site Games Planet and uploaded it to Steam like it is a Steam version. Nacon broke the law and breached the contract. We informed Steam of this and prevented the game from being released. So you combine the incident from February 2020 and the one from December of 2020 and what's happening now, this marks Nacon's third public attempt to publish a pirated PC version of their game. Now, what makes this latest incident unique is that Nacon is not only pirating the game and selling it, but they also went ahead and looked through the game's files and made some modifications of their own, which is certainly very legally questionable, especially while the legal battle is ongoing. Remember how Bigben and Nacon have a proclivity for trying to claim something that isn't their own as their own by removing the logos of other entities who they don't want involved, like the developers Frogwares? Well, one of the things that they did was replace the Games Planet logo an official Frogwares licensee. And you can see that right down here. They not only explain exactly how they did it, which files they modified, but you can see right here, this is what showed in the Frogwares version of the game. In Nacon's modified version, instead of this logo showing up, Nacon appears. Oh, but there's more. In the loading menu, you can see that Nacon modified it in such a way that the Games Planet logo was entirely missing. It's just no longer there. And then finally, when you go to the main menu in the original version, you got something on the bottom left here that acted as a link to Frogwares' other games, and on the bottom right, you got a label that reads, "This version of the Sinking City is for the exclusive distribution on Games Planet." Nacon removed both of those elements. This is very much the equivalent of a student stealing somebody else's homework, erasing their name, and then putting theirs in instead, but without changing the contents and without changing the handwriting. Like, it's still very clearly, identifiably that other students' work. It's just the name was replaced. And another difference you might notice is that below how to play, there used to be a play more option. That is no longer there. And here's how Frogwares explained the implications of that. The play more option leads to dynamic content with links towards external servers. This dynamic content is also used to check and verify what version is used. It is a non-intrusive security measure made specially for pirates and hackers. So it's a security measure that the publisher removed because, well, their intention was very much to pirate the game. Now, in addition to all this, Bigben and Nacon didn't just remove signatures from the game's menus, but also from the executable, as detailed by Frogwares right here. in what Frogwares calls an attempt by Nacon to anonymize the game master. And you can see from screenshots posted by Frogwares that before the executable had a digital signatures tab that indicated who this was a property of. But if you look at the version released on Steam on February 26th, there is no such tab to be found. All of the other tabs are there. You've got general, compatibility, security, details, previous versions, general, compatibility, security, details, previous versions, but digital signatures, completely gone. They completely wiped that away. Now, even more egregious is that according to Frogwares, the version that Nacon pirated and then uploaded to Steam was the deluxe version of the game, featuring additional content that was made after their partnership with Nacon. We're talking about additional content that Nacon was not involved in, that Nacon didn't pay for in any way, shape, or form or fund. And so Nacon is stealing additional content of our game that is outside the contract we had with them. In addition to all that, their version is just the worst version because they deleted all of the achievements that Frogwares had prepared. And finally, Frogwares claims that Nacon requested keys from Steam to commercialize the game on platforms where Nacon doesn't have any rights to commercialize the game in order to extend their market with pirated and hacked version of the game and prevent Frogwares from getting any money from their property. Now, beyond providing receipts and technical details on how Nacon managed to hack their Sinking City game, pirated and modify it, they also apparently discovered who did it by looking at who specifically uploaded the pirated version of the game. The name they came across was Philip Szalkiewicz. However that's pronounced, I'm just going to call him Philip. This man is the managing director at Neopica, which is a company that was acquired by Nacon in October of 2020 after collaborating for several years. And beyond that, Philip has the technical know-how to be able to make the modifications that were made for the Nacon uploaded pirated version of the Sinking City. Philip is apparently a technical director of the studio, programmer with more than 20 years of experience. His experience is exactly the one needed for someone working on compiling games on a daily basis. And the games that Neopica has recently worked on were all made using Unreal Engine, which is just like the Sinking City, and so because they share the same engine, that makes it even easier for someone like Philip to go through the files and modify them in the way that the publisher requested. The blog post finally concludes by recapping everything, but then they also go into the potential consequences that Nacon might be facing. It is cited by Frogwares here that intellectual property laws in France are rather serious. There's a legal conflict that is happening in France and can lead up to 7 years in jail and 750,000 euros of fines plus damages, as the Article 335.4 from Intellectual Property Code points out. Only time will tell whether Bigben and Nacon face the consequences, whether they're guilty of what Frogwares is accusing them of. Again, I don't know the details of the contracts that were signed. What I do know is, at least from a moral perspective, everything Nacon has been doing as of late in regards to the Sinking City looks shady as all hell, and Frogwares, so far, the only ones who have actually been supplying evidence to the general public and have been completely open about things, at least as far as we know, whereas Nacon, all they have said is, oh, how dare they do this to us? I wish they would just respect us and be amicable about things instead of being so unprofessional, and they've just been putting out these PR statements that don't tell us much about Nacon's side of things, which may suggest that Nacon has a lot to hide. And I don't know about you, but I've never seen a publisher who is confident in their legal standing when it comes to ownership of IP that has done something like this. Pirating and cracking and modifying somebody else's work downloaded from some other storefront to then re-upload on Steam with new labels, with removed signatures. It all just seems not standard procedure. Oh, wait, something interesting just happened. It would seem as though the Sinking City has been delisted from Steam, because that Steam statement I just showed you, when I try to go to it, it just shows the message, oops, sorry, an error was encountered while processing your request. The item is currently unavailable in your region, and IGN has updated their article on this whole situation. IGN seems to be able to confirm that Steam has now delisted the Sinking City after developer Frogwares alleged yesterday that the game's publisher Nacon bought a copy of the Sinking City, altered it to include Nacon logos, and re-uploaded the game to Steam to sell to customers without Frogwares' permission. Now, I don't know if this was Nacon's decision to delist this after realizing this would get get them in a lot of legal trouble, or if Steam stepped in and removed the game on Frogwares' behalf. But either way, there does seem to be merit to Frogwares' claims if the situation has developed as such. The fact of the matter is that based on the information that the public has right now, and based on how Nacon has behaved and conducted themselves, it's hard for me to not side with Frogwares on this one unless some new evidence crops up that Frogwares did a lot of wrong on their end, but so far, Nacon hasn't spoken to that effect. And so far, Nacon has just seemed incredibly shady with many of their actions. At the end of the day, though, what will matter for this legal battle will be the evidence presented, and it's hard to say whether Nacon has something to present that legitimizes their arguments and their recent actions. But so far, I don't know, I've got to say, it's just not looking good for Nacon. Frogwares is being very open. Nacon just doesn't seem to have a lot to say when you look at their responses. But time will tell how this all plays out. But that's just one man's take. Let me know in the comments below what you think about Frogwares' latest accusations against Nacon. And to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.